Hello everyone, and welcome to the Skillsroad webinar. Today's discussion is titled, Australian Youth, Are They Thriving or Surviving? We are pleased to welcome our presenters for today, James Moran and Danielle Buckley. This webinar is live and interactive. You're encouraged to post questions to the presenters in the bottom left corner of your screen. If you're experiencing any technical issues during the webinar, please dial our support team on 1-800-733-416. This number is also listed in the chat box. I'd like to now pass you over to James to begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's James Moran here, National General Manager of Apprenticeship Support Australia. We're also joined by our registered psychologist, Danielle Buckley, and Danielle's going to take us through a deep dive into the results of the Skillsroad Youth Census. The Skillsroad Youth Census was commissioned by Apprenticeship Support Australia in consultation with registered psychologist Danielle Buckley. Danielle, welcome this afternoon, and thanks for taking us through the interesting reports that are coming out of the Youth Census report. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, and welcome everyone to the webinar today. As James said, today we're going to talk about Australians. Are they thriving or are they just surviving? We're going to go through what is wellbeing and why measure it. We're going to look at how young Australians are doing. Particularly, we're going to look at what are they worried about, what they're doing well in, and how we can help them improve. We're going to look at what improves wellbeing and look particularly at the role of working, looking at the role of career conversations, and looking at the role of you as a parent, a teacher, or an employer. And we're going to look at workplace expectations. So what are young people saying about what they need in businesses? What do they want from employers? And what can you do as a business or employer to help people thrive? It really is my pleasure to be here today. And some of you have probably heard me speak before, but even though this is a webinar, I really encourage you to participate and be as interactive as possible. There'll be lots of opportunities throughout the webinar today, and I'm going to ask you to write in the chat box some answers to some questions. I'm going to share some polls and get your input so I can find a little bit out about who's on the call. We've had over 200 people register, so this really shows how important this is, not just for us, but for other people as well. And that interaction is going to start right now with the first poll. I'm going to ask you, who are you today? What hat are you wearing? So when you're on this call, are you on this call today as a teacher? And do you want to know a little bit about what it means to be a teacher in school and how you can help young people? Are you on this webinar today as a parent, wanting to know how you can help your young person? Or are you perhaps an employer and wanting to know how you can help your apprentices or trainees or young people at work? Some people say I'm both, or I'm all of them. So if you are more than one person, please tick the all box. The screen has popped up, so just select the answer that is most appropriate to you. And just a really gentle reminder that the slides will be available in the form of a YouTube clip recording of the webinar after the presentation. So if you'd like a copy later or you want to listen to it later on, you can access it. Okay, so we've got slightly more people as teachers. 35% of you are teachers, but 34% are wearing more than one hat today. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, what I want you to think about at the very beginning, before we dig into this webinar, is I just want you to stop and take a moment and sit back and just reflect. I want you perhaps, if you're sitting at a desk, to shut your eyes for a few seconds and think about what you want for your child, what you want for your students, or if you're an employer, what you want for your young employee. If you had any dream about how they are, what do you want for them? What do you want them to be? How do you want them to think, feel? What does that look like? And what I want you to do is just write the words that come into your mind in your chat box so we can get a bit of an idea of what you want. So as a parent or employer, I hope for and want for my child or my employee to what? What do you want? Well, you're writing your words in there. Let me share, I'm a mum of two. I have a son and a daughter. And for my kids, I really want them to be the best version of themselves. And when I think about their future and I think about their life, I think about my role as helping them really, really live their life to the full. What are some words that spring to mind for you? Most people, when we do this and I ask this question, say really similar things, and it's so great to see so many responses. Thank you. So many people have said things like thrive, happiness, confidence, happy is coming up time and time again, be the best person, resilient, protective, happy.
People want to have
opportunity, attitude.
Yep. Having access to employment's coming out there too, Danielle.
Absolutely. So what we're starting to see is people listing a whole lot of emotions, but also a whole lot of experiences. And that is really important to me because when we think about well-being is more than just an experience of a single emotion. When somebody or when our young people, us as individuals, experience high levels of well-being, we are flourishing, we are thriving, and we are being the best version of ourselves. And well-being is not just perhaps maybe how some businesses in the past have thought about well-being, flexible work hours, having fruit in the office and getting a flu shot. Well-being is about the way that we experience our lives. And well-being summarises all those fantastic things that everybody has started to put down in that chat box. And I can see even more things, great relationships, meaningful opportunities. I love that someone has written, I want my kids to pay rent, because as you'll find out, that actually financial contribution is meaningful and important and increases well-being. So thank you for the person that put that in there. So what is well-being? Well-being is about how people experience their lives. And it's more than just happiness. It's more than just a fleeting emotion. Well-being is about feeling good and functioning well. And I think whatever hat you're wearing today, whether you're wearing a teacher hat, a parent hat, or an employer hat, we want that for ourselves, but we also want for the people that work for us. Because we know when an individual thrives, the communities then reap the rewards and the communities feel all those benefits. You know, think about a time when you were perhaps experiencing a high level of well-being. What were you doing? How were you behaving? And what impact did that have on your life, but also the people around you? I'm going to put up another poll. I want to ask you how you're feeling today. 1, not good and unhappy. 2, okay, not that happy. 3, good, I'm sort of happy. 4, very good and pretty happy. 5, excellent and very happy. Oh, we've got a positive group on here today. This is good. It is a wellbeing talk after all. So it's nice to see that the majority of people are in the 4s. So feeling very good and pretty happy. I'll leave that up just for a couple of seconds longer. But almost half of you are very good and pretty happy. And that's pretty amazing. It's amazing because this is probably one of the most stressful times of the year. It's almost Christmas and usually social calendars are bursting and people are tired and stressed, and I don't know, but for some unknown reason, everybody in business seems to want things done by Christmas. When I worked in private practice, December was always the busiest month of the year. But I'm asking you how you feel today because emotions are really fleeting. And you might feel really good today or you might feel really bad today, as some people do. But that doesn't mean tomorrow you're not going to feel the same, or tomorrow you might feel different. And it's important to think about this because when we think about well-being, it is that whole experience of feeling good and functioning well. It's not just about feeling happy. And I want to just challenge you, for the people listening on the call today, to really understand what well-being means. And well-being is a term of all those words and those experiences and those associations that you all wrote in that chat box earlier today. Well-being is not just about feeling happy, and it's not just about how you feel today. It's about creating an experience. And in fact, well-being is these things. Well-being is about self-acceptance. Well-being is about pro-social behaviour. It's about being optimistic. It's about having empathy, being autonomous and having that sense of autonomy, which means feeling in control of your life. It's about having vitality and self-esteem. And one of the really big things is resilience. And we'll talk a little bit about that later and perhaps the lack of resilience that many of our young people face. Our well-being is also about positive relationships, and so many of you wrote positive relationships in your chat box. It's about positive emotions, meaning, and this is an important one, particularly when we talk about work and we look at what meaning, where we can get meaning from. It's about engagement, emotional stability, it's about confidence, and it's about clear thinking. And so many of you wrote these things in terms of what you want for your child or your student or your employee. And I want to introduce wellbeing to you, and I want you to start thinking about wellbeing as an umbrella term for all of these things. So when it comes to saying, in my business or with my child, I want to improve something, usually if it's one of these things, you're working on their wellbeing. When we did the Skillsroad Youth Census today, wellbeing was a feature. It was a feature because wellbeing provides us with the ability to understand where people need to change. So overall, we get a measure, but not only do we get a score, we also get a deep dive into which of these areas young people are high in and which of these areas young people need to develop more on. So the tool that we used in the wellbeing, in the Skillsroad Youth Census, is a new wellbeing survey, new wellbeing tool that hasn't been released for very long, so it doesn't have a lot of comparisons amongst youth in the Australian population. In fact, there's none. But wellbeing is measured by these areas, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment when we go through the results. Overall, in the survey, as I said, we looked at overall scores of wellbeing. And just to give you a bit of a snapshot, these scores of wellbeing are now broken down by state, and they're broken down by males and females. And in Australia at the moment, the sample that we used, completed questions, was over 25,000 people. These were the overall wellbeing scores that we saw amongst the youth that completed the survey. And these are broken down into male and female. And just at this very, very quick glance, you will see that there's some pretty stark differences between how our males are doing compared to the females who completed the survey. You'll also see that there's some significant variations, particularly with Tasmania, in terms of males and females, and some slight variations overall between states. But we're going to talk a little bit about that later. We'll also see that the tool that we use, as I said, measured wellbeing by all of those 15 categories, and many of these 15 categories are the things that you've written down in your questions and in your ideas before about what you want for your child. So self-acceptance, pro-social behaviour, and you'll see there's some standouts there as well, where young people rate themselves, what they rate themselves as highest in and what they rate themselves as lowest in. When we start looking at these, this is why it's important to think about wellbeing, particularly from a business perspective, because when we look at wellbeing as an overarching theme, and then we look at wellbeing and the different factors that make wellbeing, we can start to get a little bit of an idea of where we need to focus. So it's great to focus on things and important to focus on making things even better for people, absolutely. But when we think about wellbeing and we think about what our young people need, looking at something like this can help us inform where we need to focus some of our energies. And particularly if businesses only have a small window to invest with some of their young people, taking these kind of results and applying them into your business can help inform you in terms of the way you work with the people that you hire. So before I just dive down into the survey, and please write down any questions that you've got in the chat box, because in a minute I'm going to open it up to questions. But why are we focusing on wellbeing, and why does it matter for youth? We know that kids with higher wellbeing actually have better educational outcomes, and they're more likely to move into full-time work. So one of the things that we're really passionate about at Skillsroad and at ASA is helping young people move from education and into meaningful work and into meaningful pathways. We know that childhood wellbeing actually predicts positive adult wellbeing. So if we can set our children up and we can set our youth up really early on with some of these important skills, it's protective factors for them later in life. It's protective factors against mental illness, but also protective factors for just surviving and getting through life. We also know that based on some other research, youth can be a pretty tricky time for a lot of young people. And we know that while people who are perhaps 16 and 17-year-old at an exciting time of their life, they're finishing school and they're thinking about what's next, when they actually start thinking about what's next and they get to a little bit older and in their early 20s, many experience a dip in wellbeing, a dip in satisfaction with life. And that's because confronting what's next can be pretty daunting and pretty scary. So it's important that we take this seriously and we start helping young people develop all of these different components of wellbeing so they're in a good position for moving into adulthood. And interestingly enough, people who earn over $150,000 actually report higher levels of resilience than those with household income less than $15,000. And I'm just going to park that with you there, and I'm going to revisit that when we talk about wellbeing and work for young people later on. So,
Danielle, we do have a question.
Yes.
Oh, we've got a question that's come in from Jared. How is resilience measured?
Oh, okay, good question. So when we used, in this particular survey, we used a tool called the Wellbeing Profile, and resilience is measured based on three, in the Wellbeing Profile, resilience is measured based on 3 questions. In this, resilience is based on 2, but it's been defined as a construct, and there's been a lot of research done in the tool to understand which 2 and 3 questions are the best measure of resilience. So why does wellbeing matter? And we've looked at why wellbeing matters for youth, but in terms of work, wellbeing matters because people who have high levels of wellbeing, or people who are thriving or flourishing and experiencing all of high levels of those different categories that we spoke about, they're nearly 6 times more engaged. They're 29% more likely to be productive. They're 45% more satisfied in their jobs. They're 46% less likely to have unhealthy days, otherwise we call that presenteeism, and 125% less likely to burn out and 32% less likely to quit. So if there's any employers sitting on the line today or listening to this webinar and are sitting there and thinking, why should I change? Why should I invest in wellbeing? If I was running a business, I would want all of these things. And I think what we're starting to see is the arguments for improving wellbeing are really strong, and the arguments for focusing on wellbeing are really strong. Equally, when businesses do focus on wellbeing at work, there's some pretty good results. So we've also seen that companies that invest in improving wellbeing and have employees with high level of wellbeing, so employees who are thriving, have fewer safety incidents by 70%, 41% lower absenteeism, 24 to 59% lower turnover, and 3.5 times more likely to be creative or innovative, and 10% higher customer ratings. We also know in some recent research that for every dollar spent on wellbeing in the workplace, there is an average $2.30 on positive return. So the research is starting to emerge that shifting our focus and focusing on wellbeing and focusing on wellbeing as an umbrella and all these things that sit within it, such as the positive relationships, resilience, pro-social behaviour, has an impact. It not only has an impact for the individual, but it has an impact for your business as well. We've got a couple of questions coming through, and I'm going to address them in a moment. But before I do, I just want you to think about, for you, what does it mean to invest in wellbeing? If you're investing in wellbeing in your business and you were getting some of these returns, what would you be doing? What does that look like? You can write your answer in the chat box. Okay, some of these answers are fantastic. So modelling wellbeing, I love that. It's such an important, point to talk about. Promotion of wellbeing, productivity, being genuine. Guys, thanks so much. These responses are fantastic. Building a culture of wellbeing, positive work environment. I love that response, and I'm going to come back to that because that's really important in some of the findings we've had for you. So what do you currently do? I'm going to put this poll up as these answers come through. I'm curious as to know what you currently do in your business when it comes to improving wellbeing. Coaching, mentoring, getting providers, learning sessions. can fill in that poll. That'd be great. Learning sessions. So it looks like most people doing coaching mentoring, followed by learning sessions. Mentoring staff is coming up quite a lot for how you invest in wellbeing. Okay, so it looks like most people invest in coaching and mentoring, which is great. And we're going to refer to that when I go through these slides in a minute. As we've talked about, and we're just about to go through a deep dive, I've got some of your information. But again, just to summarise why we're focusing on youth, is because this is a really important time in young people's lives. As I said, late teens and early 20s is really happy for a lot of young people. But then as they start to embark on their early 20s and they start thinking about careers, it starts to become pretty daunting. And what we've found in some of the Youth Census research is that there's actually quite a lot of things that we can do to make this less daunting. And there's a lot of things that we can do to actually improve the wellbeing of young people. So let me introduce the Skillsroad Youth Census to you and some of the findings that we've had. Just as a background, this was commissioned by ASA and it's been our second year running. So that's Apprenticeship Support Australia. It's been the second year running, and this year it's been overwhelming, the response that we've had. We had over 30,000 young people respond. But 25,000, just over 25,000 completed all the questions. And we looked at how young people are doing overall. So overall, what is their wellbeing? We looked at that, what are they stressed and worried about? We then went into, so what factors are going to improve their wellbeing? And we looked at their school experiences, the role of career conversations, and then we looked at the different post-school pathways that people can go down. And then finally, we looked at, well, when they get into work, what are some of their workplace expectations? What do they want from employers? But also, what practices do employers do that improve wellbeing? Which is why I've just asked you the question before, so I can come back and share with you not only what you do, but in fact what young people want. And now I don't need to be, well, I'm curious now, who's actually read the report before I go through all of this? I'm asking another poll here. I told you this would be interactive. It's okay to say no. Oh, straight up no. Very good. We're going to go through the answers, and if you haven't downloaded the report, once I go through this at a really high level, there's so much information in here. If you haven't read the report, which is actually most of you, please go to the Skillsroad website after, and you can download the link to the report. And we'll also have a whole lot of resources that are all free for you to use after the webinar, and you can use them whether you're a parent or you're an employer or you're a teacher. Obviously, there's lots on the website for you as well. Okay, so how are young people doing? I'm going to give you a snapshot overall, and then I'm going to show you some of the graphs. So obviously, different states have varying results. Overall, in terms of youth, they're doing the highest and they're doing the best in positive relationships, pro-social behaviour, clear thinking, and competence. However, youth score themselves lowest in vitality, emotional stability, resilience, and self-acceptance. Males are doing better than females overall, and males rated themselves higher in every dimension except empathy and pro-social behaviour. And I can tell you quite honestly now, as a mother of a daughter, some of these really, really concern me. When we look at the overall states, we see New South Wales has the highest level of wellbeing and Tasmania has the lowest. Queensland, ACT, Victoria, Western Australia, South Australia, pretty variable, but Northern Territory and Tasmania certainly outliers there. Again, as I said, all of these components make up what it means to have wellbeing. Wellbeing's our umbrella term, but all of these components make up wellbeing: clear thinking, competence, emotional stability. And as I said, positive relationships have been rated the highest, followed by pro-social behaviour, clear thinking, and competence. Sadly, though, some of the lowest are vitality, emotional stability, resilience, and self-acceptance. One of the questions that we ask young people is just how their daily functioning is, how they're living their lives. And the question we asked was, in the past 12 months, have you experienced sadness, anxiety, or worry that has significantly impacted how you study, live or work. 65% of young people said yes to that question. They said that they have experienced sadness, anxiety, worry or stress that significantly impacts how they study, work or live. Now, again, I'm going to put my parent hat on and not my work hat, but if I go back to the question I asked you at the very beginning, what you want for your child, whether that be as a child, a teacher or an employer, I don't think anyone would want their child to answer yes to this question, but we had 74% of females answer yes and 53% of males. Now, don't be too surprised because this is actually in line with a lot of other research. Some research came out of South Australia to say that actually only 20% of people are flourishing, thriving, and this is definitely in line with that. We also asked, this is a split between states. So in terms of, again, the different states, relatively similar, but a huge difference between males and females. We also asked young people what their biggest worry about growing up in Australia was. Housing affordability came out as the top. So 28% of young people said that housing affordability was their biggest worry growing up in Australia. And what's interesting to me, now I put my work hat back on, is that people are most worried about housing affordability, yet 65% of people have experienced such significant levels of negative emotions that have impacted the way they live their life. So in terms of the state of well-being of young people, I think we've got some opportunity, and I think we've got a few challenges ahead, but some opportunity to start working with young people to improve some of these factors of well-being, because while they're doing okay, in my book, they're certainly not thriving, or many of them are not thriving. Again, so to recap, we know that males are doing better than females. We know where young people are doing their best at is in positive relationships, pro-social behaviour, competence and clear thinking. But there's a lot of work to be done in self-acceptance. There's a lot of work to be done in emotional stability, vitality and resilience. I think one of the most interesting findings for me was when we looked at what inspires young people and what are the biggest influence of young people. Sadly, a lot of young people said that social influences were their influence, and that's something I would beg to change. I'm going to put up a poll here when other people, I'm going to ask any questions as well on this section. But do these results surprise you? Yes, no, unsure. And any questions on how young people are doing? We have one question around, do kids believe that money makes them happy? This is a really good question. And I'm going to leave that until we talk about work, because I think that fits into the work section. Any other questions? Oh, we've had a question around social media be harnessed for good. Absolutely, of course it can. And I think we're starting to see quite a lot of social media harnessed for good. I guess the challenge is social media is unfiltered. And, you know, there's quite a lot of research around the addiction that social media has. And when we can't filter what people see and the addiction that people get, what people see on social media is a snapshot of somebody's life, and a crafted, perfect snapshot in a lot of cases that does not match reality. And I know you all know this already, but sadly, that's some of the challenges that we see with young people.
Danielle, okay. A couple of questions here. There's one that, from Leanne that says, why do you think males are doing better than females?
Well, it's a really good question, but when I look at the data, and I look at this data in particular, I think that the work that needs to be done with females is around their self-acceptance, their emotional stability, and their resilience. In terms of why, I don't know exactly. I'd love to find out more, and in fact, I'm doing a little bit of research into that, but I know they're the areas that we need to work on if we want our females to get to the same level as the males.
And Joe's also asked, what do we mean by vitality?
Oh, good question. Vitality is being full of life. It's being zesty and vital and bringing energy to the moment. That's what it means to have vitality. Okay, so what factors improve wellbeing? We've had a little bit of a snapshot as to how our young people are doing, but let's look at how they're doing and what factors improve wellbeing based on the results of the survey, both at school and out of school, through career conversations and through post-school pathways. So we asked young people about whether they were at school with no job, whether they were at school with a casual or part-time job, or whether they were at school doing a school-based apprenticeship or traineeship. And when we did the survey, just to recap, we had 42% of people were female, had left schools at school with no job. Overall, their wellbeing scores were on average. School with a casual or part-time job, their scores were 112, and then when we looked at kids who were at school doing a school-based training, wellbeing scores were 117. Just following on from that, what factors improve wellbeing? Well, when we asked kids again who were at what they were doing with their life in general, kids who, or youth I should say, who were working or doing an apprenticeship or traineeship had a wellbeing score of 119, whereas young people who were studying had a wellbeing score of 112, whereas those who were not in any kind of paid employment or study had a wellbeing score of 109. What this tells us is that working increases or has increased in these situations. It has increased young people's wellbeing score. Now, this is absolutely not a surprise in terms of the literature on wellbeing and work. We know that when people work, it improves their wellbeing. But what this tells us in this context is how important it is for young people to get involved in the workplace and how important it is for young people to work. And I know there's often some controversy as to whether kids should get part-time jobs, and different people have different views on that. But what I find really fascinating is even when we go back and we look at young people who are at school, young people who are at school with some kind of casual job have higher levels of wellbeing than young people who have no kind of employment whatsoever. And I think this is a really, really fascinating finding. And I absolutely love the comment that somebody said apprenticeships seem to be making a comeback. You know, I think, again, as a psychologist, this is not a surprise to me. It really isn't, because what apprenticeships give people are all of these great access to all of these great experiences, umbrella of wellbeing. Because when apprenticeships are done well, they give people goals, they give people confidence, they give people autonomy, they give people positive relationships, the ability to do something they're good at. And one of the outcomes I would love to see from this is more young people experiencing the benefit of going down the apprenticeship pathway, because as we can see, it's really paying dividends to our young people. Interestingly, we know work is good for young people, and we've seen in terms of what people do working in an apprenticeship or going down the path of a traineeship has been related to such high levels of wellbeing. When it comes to experiences of career advice at school, young people aren't getting very good access to it. So based on our survey, only 52% of people said that yes, they felt they got great information about all the options available to them when they were asked about whether they got good career advice at school. 22% said, I wish I had have known more about the options available to me. 20% said that they felt that they were pushed or encouraged to go to 3% said that they felt they were pushed or encouraged to go into apprenticeship or traineeship, and 3% were other. I find this really fascinating. Interestingly, though, while we need to improve how youth receive information about work and career advice, particularly in schools, what is really reassuring is how important it is for other people to provide this advice as well. And, you know, while we may be quick, some people may be quick to blame the role of schools, there's actually opportunity for parents and the wider community. And now, obviously, Skillsroad is a fantastic tool and I would encourage you all to use it. But access to career advice from anybody important in your life is so important for young people. And when youth in the survey were asked, I have an app to discuss my career concerns and worries, almost 80% said yes, 10% said no, 10.4%, and 10.7% said not sure. Yet, well, again, when we look at the column of people who said yes, and we compare that to somebody to discuss their career with is incredibly important. As we were saying, it's very important, as we found out in the survey, for young people to have somebody in their life to turn to talk about their career conversations and their career concerns and worries. And those who did report significantly higher levels of wellbeing than those that did not. So, question for you as parents. Do you think parents tend to push their children into university pathways? I'll put this poll up and let's see what people think. So 1 to 6. Put the poll up and let's see. Do parents tend to push their children into university? Okay, so we've got almost 60% saying yes, or it's going down, 40%. So parents either expect their kids to go to university or expect their child to study either in apprenticeship or university, but whatever makes them happy. 38 to 48%. I'm going to stop the poll now. I'm going to show you the results of what people in the Youth Census said. So when we asked young people, what's their perception of their parents' expectation when it comes to finishing school? In first place, youth said that their parents expect them to go to university. So 43% had said that, 43% of 20 to 24-year-olds, and 28% of 15 to 19-year-olds. And in second place, they expect them to study, but it was completely up to them in terms of whether they did an apprenticeship or university pathway. And again, I think these results are really interesting. I think they give us a great snapshot of perhaps what young people, the pressure that young people are facing, and maybe opens up more of a conversation as to how important career conversations are in an open and informative way, both at school but also at home.
Danielle, it also goes to the lack of information that might be available to youth as they're transitioning into work as well. And when you touched on Skillsroad before, making people aware that there is information out there if they are one of those parents or adults that kids are relying on for information, that there's resources there to help them to do that. And skillsroad.com.au is a good place to start.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we've certainly found over the years of doing this and through the results of this survey is the choice for people is overwhelming. And if it's overwhelming for a young person, it's definitely going to be overwhelming, particularly for a parent who might not know about all the available pathways for their kids. So again, I would really encourage everybody to get onto Skillsroad and invest time in learning about what options are available. And the career quiz that we've created now is a way to help young people start to think about, well, hold on, what might I be suited in as a pathway because of the skills and the strengths I have? And we need to change our thinking again when it comes to what career pathway will I go down? Because the world is a very different place when it comes to work now. It's not like it used to be, particularly when I finished school and went to university, where you studied for a job. Now we're not going to study for a job, because with the role of globalisation and automation, we don't know what jobs will be available in 20 and 30 years' time. But what we do need to do is study for a set of skills and strengths, and particularly things that we're interested in, and then use that pathway to guide our learning journey as we have a career and we move across what they say now will likely be 5 different careers and multiple jobs. One of the most
I'll just jump in there too, Danielle. With regard to schools, the people that are in the audience that are associated with schools, getting information out there about school-based traineeships is important too. So if schools want more information, then we're available to be able to help with that as well, to get that information out to youth as they transition.
Absolutely. A couple of other questions that have come through is around the report. Is the report available? And absolutely it is. Again, you can download all of this from the Skillsroad website. If you want more information, the report is there, so I encourage you to read it. And yes, we have staff all over Australia. This is a national survey, which is one of the great benefits of it. And we have staff in every location. So please get in contact with one of the team and they can help you. One of the most fascinating results to me is, well, there's a few, but this is one of them, about so what we asked is, what did you do after you left school? What pathway did you go down? And then we looked at, well, what pathway led to what level of wellbeing? And I definitely observed that there tends to be a number of cultural biases in Australia. And I think we've already seen the one that's around university, finish school, go to university, because maybe our parents expect us to, or we believe our parents expect us to. The other interesting one is that I'm going to finish school, I'm going to take a gap year. But actually, when we looked at when kids finished school and what they did with their time, I thought the results were really interesting. The pathway that produced the highest level of wellbeing was when kids left school and they got an apprenticeship, followed by leaving school and getting a full-time job, and getting a traineeship, and starting my own business. And what we see with these trends is that all of these trends involve working in some capacity. And I touched on it before, that the apprenticeship structure, when you think about it in terms of, when it's done well and setting up somebody for having high levels of well-being, it's in the bag, because you've got coaching, you've got mentoring, you've got this opportunity to progress and build positive relationships. You've got this ability to have a sense of autonomy in what you do. You have meaning, you have optimism, and it really is, as a structure, it's set up phenomenally well. And again, what we're seeing is that work is so good for us. Whenever we are involved in work, we experience high levels of well-being when we're not working. But most interesting in this is the kids who took a gap year but didn't work, so they travelled and they did nothing, had some of the lowest levels of well-being out of anybody in the survey. And I think this is a really interesting finding. And I'm not at all saying don't take a gap year, but when we look at the kids who travelled or took time off and worked compared to kids who took time off and did nothing, we can see a really significant difference in the way that they experience life. So again, if I come back to the question that I asked you all at the very beginning, what do you want for your child or your student or your employee? And most people want them to thrive and flourish. We're starting to get a really good picture here of what sort of things people need to do to flourish. And what we know is we need to get people into work. We need young people to find career pathways and start working. And, even part-time jobs at school are improving young people's level of well-being. And this may be from a career perspective by working when you're at school or working in a part-time job. You might find out as much about what you do not want to do in your career as you find out what you do want to do. And that in and of itself is a fantastic finding. What we also need to do for young people is help improve career conversations at school. We really need to advocate that career conversations are critical. They are essential. And career conversations at school are more like coaching conversations to think about what is your next step in your life. What are your skills? What are your strengths? What will bring you joy and meaning and satisfaction? And we need to have those conversations, not just at school, but also in the community and in the family home with friends, and expose our kids and our youth to a whole array of possible pathways that might be available to them based on what they're interested in and what their strengths are. And again, I would really encourage you, whether you're a teacher or a parent, to get onto the Skillsroad website. And a good starting point is to do the career quiz. And the career quiz will give a young person 7 different profiles, 1 of 7, to say, you know, these are your strengths, these are your skills, and therefore this is a starting point for you to think about what kind of work you might really thrive in. Again, you know, we're seeing and we're hearing in this report that many kids think their parents have a bias and expect them to go to university. Now, this might not actually be the reality based on your feedback. This might not be the reality, but have you had that conversation? And as a parent or a teacher or as an employer, have you challenged that bias? And have you had an open conversation about, with your child or with whoever, whatever youth you are coaching or mentoring or working with at the moment, but instead of thinking about what an expectation is, thinking about what potential pathway a young person will thrive in. What are they good at? What do they enjoy? And
Danielle,
above everything,
sorry.
No, what is it?
I was going to say the challenge there for employers as well is to think about what opportunities they can create within their workplaces to bring youth in on a part-time basis, maybe while they're at school, maybe consider a school-based traineeship so that youth are transitioning while they're still at school but getting some work-based skills and earning some money at the same time. So as much as we're challenging the parents and the teachers, I throw it out there to the employers to be thinking about, well, what can they be doing to create these opportunities for youth because of the benefits you've been talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And even creating volunteer opportunities where you can. Creating volunteer opportunities or work experience opportunities is really important to teach kids about the skills of working. And, you know, every time I suggest this in a public forum, people always say, but I'm so busy, I don't have time to do this. And I'm reluctant to say, but I would encourage you to make time. I would encourage you that all of these experiences that you can create are investments in wellbeing, both for your workplace, but also for the kids who are coming in.
I might just jump in there too and give
about work. Are there any questions?
Just wanted to give the plug to the jobs board on the Skillsroad side as well, Danielle. If parents are wondering what jobs are out there, there is a jobs board on there that they can take their kids through to have a look at what opportunities are sitting there now so they can start to think about those sort of job roles.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, again, when we do these roadshows around Australia and we speak to employers are constantly saying to us, aren't they, you know, it's so difficult to get an apprenticeship who wants to work and an apprentice who will stay on. And then whenever we do these forums with parents and teachers, we've got this disconnect because so many people are saying it's so difficult to find an apprenticeship. And so the jobs board is really a great solution to marry those two challenges up. The final piece that I want to talk about today is when we looked at youth and workplaces. So particularly we wanted to find out what do youth expect from work, and then what workplace practices actually improve the wellbeing of youth. We know what improves the wellbeing of youth in a school-based setting, but what improves it at work? And again, I'm going to ask for your participation. What do you think people want from work? There's 8 things up there. What do you think young people want? Opportunities for progression, positive, friendly work environment, good. Work-life balance, flexibility. Well, I'm going to say that most of you know your young people well, which is really good. So based on our results, over 1/3 of respondents 38% report that the number one thing they expect or expected from an employer when starting work is a positive and friendly work environment, followed by coaching and mentoring, and then opportunities for progression. And these were the top 3 expectations in any type of work, so apprenticeship, traineeship, and other types of paid employment. And when we broke this down across state and territory, this was also consistent across all state and territories. And again, I think this is fascinating, and I think this really shows a lot about young people today and a lot about what they want from work and who they are. And again, if we look at their wellbeing scores and we look at what they're already really high in, they rate themselves highest in positive relationships, and they expect that when they go to work, they're going to have positive relationships at work, and they're going to have opportunities for coaching and mentoring and opportunities to progress, because when they get there, they're hungry and they want to do good and they want to be good. Interestingly, the role of the manager is critical to performance and wellbeing. And one of the things I'll advocate and have advocated for a long time is how important it is that managers are upskilled and managers have the coaching and mentoring skills they require to actually coach and mentor and manage young people today. So thankfully, what we have seen in the report is that most young people think their manager is pretty good. So 40% say, almost 40% say excellent, and 33% say very good. So when you positively rate your manager, very good or excellent, you'll actually say that your wellbeing is significantly higher. So if, again, for those of you who really like to have the metrics before you make a change in anything, if you look at this graph, what you'll see is young people who rate their manager as excellent have significantly higher levels of wellbeing than those who rate their manager as okay, not that good or poor. And for me, this is just, this is, if you're going to invest money in doing anything at work to help improve the wellbeing of your youth, then improve the wellbeing and improve the skills of the manager so that they can work effectively and do the coaching and the mentoring and the goal setting to enable that progression that young people want. Ensure that managers have the skills to create positive workplaces, and therefore you're going to see the return of wellbeing in your young people.
Danielle, I might just jump in there and just make employers aware of as well that when they start working with us, Apprenticeship Support Australia, they are getting access to mentoring services and coaching guidance from ASA as well. So it's not like they just commence their apprenticeship. They get that ongoing support from ASA. If they're not aware of that, please reach out and let us know, and we're happy to get involved.
Absolutely. And, the other thing on the ASA website for employers on here is if you don't have skills in coaching and mentoring, there's a toolkit on there to give you some high-level skills. There's a toolkit on there for parents as well to have coaching conversations with your youth. If you don't have the skills and you want the skills, there's plenty of resources on the website to help you, and they're all free to use. The second point is what improves wellbeing for youth at work. Young people want to feel cared for and supported at work. And again, this is not a surprise for me. Do you feel cared for and supported at work? 72% said yes, only 11% said no. But is it important for you to feel cared for and supported at work? 94% said yes. And I think we've really seen a change in the expectations of what people expect from an employer in the last 15 or so years in the workplace. I think earlier on people expected to go to work and get paid, not expected to have positive relationships and such emphasis on coaching and mentoring. And the third finding for workplaces is that young people want to know what is expected of them at work. And again, if you're going to make an investment in improving wellbeing at work for young people, help them set goals and have clear paths of progression, because again, when they know what's expected of them, you'll see they significantly have higher levels of wellbeing. 117 versus people who do not know what's expected of them is 107. And again, I think this is a really, really interesting finding for employers and also for youth. So what simple things can you do at work to create high levels of wellbeing for youth? Create a great place to work. We know that young people want positive and friendly workplaces, and what we've seen is that actually doesn't need to mean that you go and buy a foosball table. but it does mean that you need to care about the people that you work with. It means that you need to make time to build relationships. Invest in your managers. So the role of the manager is critical. Invest in their skills. Ensure that they know how to be good coaches and they know how to mentor. They know how to be leaders, but they also know how to develop growth mindsets. Again, that's really important when it comes to growth for young people. Show young people that you care about them and their development. In positive psychology language, we'll say other people matter, and other people matter more than ever before because they're telling us how important it is for them to feel cared about and respected. Make time to let youth know what is expected of them. So set clear goals and boundaries. And again, there's a goal-setting resource on the website if you don't know how to do this. And well-being at work, clearly from this, it actually doesn't need to cost you a lot. And it's more than food and fitness. It's about investing in your people. And I think for an employer or a workplace, this is one of the biggest findings that we've had from this report, that investing in young people's well-being is about your effort to invest in the person and their development. It's not necessarily about, huge amounts of money. It's about what you do with that person. We're going to wrap up now. So if anyone's got any final questions, please send them through. As you walk away from today, I want to encourage parents and teachers to just talk with your kids, to teach them about the different pathways, have career conversations, reflect on the findings from the report, and think about how you can use these in your life. For employers, I want you to invest in creating great places to work, invest in developing your managers, and invest in caring about young people. Talk to them about what's going on for them. Have those coaching conversations. And use Skillsroad as a resource. Everything that we've talked about is on Skillsroad. And there's a huge amount of resources on there that I would encourage everybody to use. And ASA, the acronym, my apologies, is Apprenticeship Support Australia. The Apprenticeship Support Australia website has got all of these tools on there as well. Can I ask if anyone has any final questions to shoot them through? But before you do, or while you do, please just type in the box, what's one thing you're going to do differently after this webinar today before we finish up? These webinars are the most successful when we go away and we act upon them. We take what we've learned and we take the research and we do something differently. Please write it in. I want to see what you're going to do differently. We want to learn from what's been useful to you, what you need more of. We're also going to put up a questionnaire to get you to fill in a minute just to let us know what you thought about the webinar, but it will be available later on. I'd like to thank you all so much for your participation. I love that there's been so many chats coming through, and any questions that we haven't answered, we will endeavour to get back to and send out later. But I love that people are going to look at how they work and change the workplace practices, looking at different career information, looking at how they can change their positivity in their workplace, and looking at career conversations. So I'm so pleased to hear that so many of you have taken on board the things we've said. I'm going to say thank you so much, and please keep the questions coming and we'll respond in due course. Thank you for your time today.
Danielle, thank you for joining us this afternoon and for that presentation. It was excellent. Anyone who'd like to see a copy of the Skillsroad census report, know that you can go to the Skillsroad website and download that report. And also today's webinar will be available to have another look at on YouTube. Thanks again, everyone, for being part of the seminar this afternoon. Please reach out to the resources you've got available on Skillsroad and through Apprenticeship Support Australia nationally. Any of our state offices would be happy to get involved with you across the country. Thanks again, Danielle, and thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you to all our presenters for your presentation, and thank you to everyone for attending the webinar. Please stay logged in to take our online survey, which is on your screen now. We thank you in advance for your feedback and wish you a great afternoon.